I think a lot of people have very legitimate, logical arguments against the Bible's authenticity, because not that it's not preserved the way that it should be, because we got those Dead Sea Scrolls and they show us that it's really well preserved, which is nuts. Like,
let's not go down that.
I don't want to go down that, but just like, who can people look at for this? Because it is insane.
I mean, just Google Dead Sea Scrolls.
How well preserved the scriptures are is absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah.
From
it's a whole reason to have faith.
It's from like
it is its own whole reason.
From an anthropological, classical studies viewpoint, it's insane that we have that ancient of a text that's so well preserved.
Supernatural.
It's a little bit supernatural.
It's more than a little bit supernatural.
So
it is entirely supernatural.
I believed that the Bible is that our current Bible is an accurate translation of what the ancients wrote. Mm-hmm. But then the question arises, is what the ancients wrote down accurate? Because ancient people are just people, and people lie all the time. So it's very easy to lie about things, and ancient texts do it all the time because they're people. So it's like, were they just making stuff up, or were they actually writing down what was happening? The reasons that I thought that I found the Bible to be a trustworthy source is that there are multiple accounts of the same events in Genesis and Exodus from multiple cultures. Mm-hmm. So we do have some records from ancient Egypt. And
we call that extra biblical attestation.
Extra biblical attestation.
Can I cut in first?
Please do.
Because that was one of the things, well, not another reason I believe, but like that was kind of when I was like, oh, this actually happened. Right. Was when they found the chariot wheels in the ocean. Mm-hmm. And I was like, because also, I love ancient Egypt. But
I love ancient Egypt.
But I think that was like a big eye-opening thing for me, because like it's also like the thing you said, people lie.
Mm-hmm. All the time.
All the time. I'm kidding.
Well, I think that's why the world was blown over by the Dead Sea Scrolls. Like for us, it's now just part of the norm. Mm-hmm. But in the early 1940s, it really wasn't part of the norm. And it's just, God is always right on time. Mm-hmm. And
where's that replica I got you?
It's right here.
Oh, there it is.
But
is that what they were in?
That's what they were.
It's a little replica of the scrolls, because she knows how I feel about the scrolls.
Smaller, not to scale.
So, yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. That's like crazy. And it's interesting because Lane mentioned it too. Like the more you look, actually, the more you see that God is real. Not that
it's not the other way.
Not
around.
The other way around. Yeah.
This also reminded me. I took a class this year called "The History of Jesus," and I did not go to a Christian university. And so it was supposed to be very just like, the guy was like a Buddhist, our professor. And it was just like...
That sounds fascinating.
And
Tell me more.
It was just like, it was all about like, what can we say for sure we know about Jesus? Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting, like going through like, all of the, like we learned all this stuff about like primary and secondary sources and stuff like that. And like how you know that stuff. And like... we went through the Gospels, and like a lot of it he was saying like, okay, like we can't be for sure that any of this stuff happened, but like we have multiple accounts of like Jesus saying certain things, and he would say like, but this is just some like peasant from the far side of the Roman Empire from thousands of years ago, and we are sure that he said something, and that's just, that in and of itself is crazy. Yeah. That like and the Roman Empire has nothing. They have no records of anything. They're like, they literally have nothing.
Like they went through phases of having good records, but
it all got like lost, and there's nothing there anymore. And like to know that someone from that time period, like for sure, you know that he like even said something. That's just like wild.
Very okay. Wild. I'm going to jump in with a couple sources on that. Gary Habermas is, in my opinion, the best current apologist who works on what's called the historicity of the resurrection. Mm-hmm. And he would tell you that there are, in the ancient cultures, 2 to 3 sources is considered really strong. And I'm not going to get this right, but I think there's only like 2 sources that Napoleon even existed. Like,
that's not right.
No, I think there's like for like Julius Caesar. There's more evidence that Jesus was alive than that Julius Caesar was alive.
So, thanks. If it's not right, I'm glad you corrected that. But Gary sets up there are 11 unquestionable sources that prove that Jesus lived and died and on the cross, and that's unheard of in historical,
especially from someone who like he's not of status, like he's just he's literally just like a carpenter,
and considering the amount of people that the Roman Empire at the time were hanging from crosses, even that wasn't.
That's right.
That was not.
There was like
that
2
was
other
just
people with
another
him that day.
Friday for them.
That's right.
That was just another.
That's
Friday.
right. So this is what I started this series with. My fundamental reason that I believe that Christianity is true is because the resurrection is testable and provable. And I'm not making that up. I pulled a bunch of resources together. They're in the book, page 117. This is called the minimal facts approach. And it basically takes all of what we are sure of from extra biblical accounts and tests which of them. So you see there are X's and checks. Yes. Which of what of the possible theories, one of which being Jesus actually did raise from the dead, and the other theories, which you may have heard, like the swoon theory, the hallucination theory, legend and myth, and so forth. Which of these satisfies all of the minimal facts? There's only 4 minimal facts, that everybody agrees on. But even if you just look at those, actually, that number's different depending on who you talk about. But I just took 4 because that was the lowest number. If you look at all 4 of those facts, there's only one thing that satisfies all of those facts that everybody agrees on. And it's that Jesus actually did come back from the dead. And so I'm really interested. I didn't mean to interrupt, but you hit the note and I was like, okay, I gotta give him a resource for that. What did your professor end up saying?
Oh, we weren't allowed to know. He like what he believed, he never told us. That was like the whole point. He was like,
but that's all right. So what did you get out of the class?
I just like that, like, I just like everything about like being able to like take it down from like, okay, like I believe these things because they're in the Bible to like, I believe these things because they are like historically accurate. Yeah. And I thought that was like a really big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I have a paper full of like things that I wanted to mention. I think I did mention on another recording the historical accuracy. Like one of the things that was a big rub for a long time is the Bible talks a lot about the Hittites, and there was no archaeological record of the Hittite culture. And people use that for a long time to debunk the Bible. This doesn't sound like anything familiar to you, because then they found like expansive evidence.
Oh, they
of
just
the
found
Hittite,
some new stuff
of the Hittite culture. And so it's like
the sea is like the low tide of the sea in where is it? I put it on my story. I was so excited about it. I forget where it is. It's a Hittite culture though. One of the seas recedes. Yeah. Now at around the year it recedes a lot, and they have like
a whole new culture that they found.
I
saw
city.
That in the news.
Yeah, it's Hittite, but it's a whole new city. And they're like, get in there before the sea comes back. And they did it a little bit last year, and now they have so much more access to it, and it is awesome.
Yeah, I love when science catches up with the Bible.
I need to
because maybe not right now.
Okay. Well, I want to be able to name drop so people can look it up if they want.
Oh.
So
I want to see it later though.
I didn't mean to interrupt your process, although I think you got us a good way. Yeah. And I really appreciate how you built a system that you could believe in. And I think that's such noble work, because
Oh, stop.
of what we're talking about, which is this blind faith, will really bite you in the rear end if you don't. I think if you don't, some people can do it.
Yeah.
And
And I respect that too. That they're
for
like,
you.
I don't need to ask questions. I believe. And I actually happen to think that, the fruits of the Spirit, the gifts of the Spirit, one of them is faith. And there are some people who are like, I don't need to ask all those questions. I know what I believe is true. And I feel like that is a gift of faith.
sounds a lot easier.
It's not my personal bent because I am a natural skeptic, but everybody gets there in their own way. So there's no judgment here for how or why you believe. There's no judgment. I just think it's good for us to talk through different avenues, different approaches, because somebody's going to be able to relate to that. Okay. How about you, Missy?
I think I relate a lot to Gianna. When I think it was the summer going into my senior year of high school, like, I had like a crisis as well, and it was just like debilitating. And,
Crisis girls.
crisis. I don't really know like where it came from, but I just like, I am also like very like, I'm very logical. I'm skeptical, and also my like family is like so like science like oriented that it's just like, I need that proof then. Like, if this is what you guys are teaching me my whole life, then like I need proof. And it's just like my mom
Is a
like,
genius.
and like if she, I'm like, okay, if she can believe this, like I need to know why
What's
she
her
believes.
PhD in?
Physical chemistry.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, okay, if she like agrees with the Bible, like I need to find out those reasons because like I need to. And I did a very similar thing to you from like literally going back to the beginning and stuff like that. And
I'm building a system.
Yeah, and a lot of mine like also had a lot to do with like science. And I think for me, one of the biggest things, like the biggest evidence that there is a God for me is like so the way that like math and physics like fit together is very like, it's incredible. So like math is just like I don't know, like it's like kind of made up. Like, if you say like math, you think it's made up,
for years.
but it's not. Like everyone thinks it's made up, but it's not. It's like a description.
Explain it like I'm 5.
Okay, so math, like these numbers are just a description of what happens in the physical world.
Okay.
So like 2 + 2 = 4. That's not just like a thing. Like if I have two plants, and then I guess there's only one more plant, I have 3 plants. Like that's like a physical description. 4 plants. It's a physical description of what happens in the world. And math like goes really far, and then like our physics kind of catches up to it, and it's like, whoa, like that's real. So like an example of that would be like a long time ago, mathematicians like invented imaginary numbers so that they could take the square root of negative numbers, so they could just go further with that math. We find imaginary numbers come up in the equations for like shoot, I forget the name. Who's that guy?
Isaac Newton.
No.
It's the only.
I mean, we saw him.
Oh my
We stood on him.
gosh. It's the thing.
We saw his grave in London. Yeah.
It's a chemistry equation. And it's the thing where like the particles exist and then they don't exist, and there's the cat.
Oh,
what is that guy's name? Schrodinger's equation. So
Wait, you said a cat.
You should have just
She said, and then there's a cat.
Oh, that's philosophy, baby. I know that.
like the imaginary numbers show up in those equations on like that level, like on that small of a scale. But it's like they're like, we discovered them and like we made them up a long time ago, but then they fit into the real physics, and you need them to make the physics work. And it's just like the math and the physics, like that shouldn't be true. The way that like we can just like say, oh, like let's just come up with the square root of negative numbers for fun.
Right.
And then it like, but it's real and it exists. And it's like the way that they work together. And I don't know, that's just always been like a huge thing for me, is seeing how
Intelligent design shows up
and
everywhere.
shows up over and over again. And like there's just no reason. Another thing, this one pastor at school was talking, and he has degrees in math. He's like incredibly smart, and he was talking about how, like, from an evolutionary perspective, we have no reason to be able to understand things about math and science.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason for us to, like,
What do you
care.
mean?
Like, it doesn't, like, if you think about evolution, like, in terms of, like, okay, like, we get stronger and, like, adapt in ways that would just, like, help us survive. And, like, theoretical physics doesn't help us survive.
Yeah.
There's no reason for our brains to be able to understand that unless we
You
were,
mean there's no reason for us to be curious?
like,
Is
yeah,
that
like
what you're
there's
saying?
no,
No,
like,
like there's
like,
no reason for
that our
brains
brains would be able to comprehend that. Like, they're like, unless we were, like, created in the, like, unless we were created to understand it like that. Like, evolutionarily, like, there's no reason for that. And that was, like, something he was talking about that I thought was interesting.
That is
because I didn't really think about that ever.
I haven't done
Like,
that either.
There's
because everything else about us is from some sort of survival.
yeah, like, you think, like, everything that makes, like, humans and, like, even just, like, animals, like, adapt and change is, like, for survival. But, like, our brains, like, shouldn't be able to understand that.
Right.
There's no reason that they would ever evolve to that level because it's not, like, helping us. Like, to a certain extent, like, curiosity would help us survive and, like, innovation, but not
Right,
like
but-
that. Like,
Right, but
like, why do we know about
Piper
black
can't
holes?
understand
like,
a black hole.
Yeah,
Like, you know,
they
like,
don't need to.
she's
Like,
a curious kitty.
yeah.
And she goes outside and she smells the grass, but she's not doing theoretical physics. Like,
That's
She-
good.
she's pretty dumb. She
Yeah.
couldn't if she tried, but please.
You know, I was looking while you were there's a book on my bookshelf. It's written by I can't
Many
remember his
books on your
first name, Allison. It's been one of my favorite books. It's one of my favorite books from seminary. It's called Historical Theology. I'll pull it down. I'm going all the way off the camera here.
Dead air.
The reason that I really like this book is that it helps. It sort of. When I was reading it for seminary, it actually felt to me like, you know how when you love, like, a novel and you stay up at night and you're, like, with your little book light in the nighttime reading it because you can't put it down. That's how I felt about this book. And the reason I felt that way is because it takes us all the way from the ancients and explains how what we believe evolved. And what reminded me of this is several things that you guys have all said, but what you just said, which is, how are we even, one of the studies that is part of philosophy is the doctrine of knowledge. And that's what you're talking about. Like, how
What is
do
that?
we know? How do we know? What do we know? Can we know anything? And so, I mean, this is why, philosophy majors get made fun of because it's like, what are you going to do with that? But if you're a super curious person, it does come, you have to keep backing it up. Like you explained, I backed it all the way up. And there are lots of books like this, but this was a really good one for me because it's like, I just accept it. I accept a lot of stuff. And I'm a skeptic, but there's a lot of stuff
that you still are just like,
like,
yeah.
of course we believe in the Trinity.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait a minute. Why do we believe in the Trinity?
It's like with Descartes said, like, if you have a basket of apples and one of them is rotten, you have to take all of them out.
Yeah.
And he said, like, he examined his beliefs one by one and put them all back in the
Yeah.
basket.
Yeah.
And that was like how I felt. Like, that's like what I felt like I was doing.
Yeah.
Like, you have to see every single thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And figure out what stands up and what is a little faulty. For example, this past year, I've been a fan of Molinism for a long time.
Big fan.
And this past year, I was unpacking it and I was like, ooh, okay, there's more to this.
What is that?
Joseph Molina, do you understand? Have you heard about middle knowledge? Okay. So basically it's about God's sovereignty. It's a little bit about theodicy. That's Theodicy. It sounds like Odyssey, so I wanted to spell it theodicy. And theodicy is basically every religion, every system of belief has to deal with the problem of evil. And so the problem of evil, for the most part, bunks up against God's sovereignty, for the most part. It's like, well, do you believe in a good God? Then we all observe and experience evil and suffering. How do we... These things sometimes for people bonk together. Yeah, thus crisis. And so you're in good company. Most people who, really take the time to examine their faith, that's a sticking point. And so one of the solutions for, okay, this is deep, but if we're all on board, I'll take us there.
Doctor Strange metaphor.
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
So one of
That's
the, but that's actually basically Molinism. One of the solutions, this guy named Joseph Molina, he was like Middle Ages, he developed this theory, which is, I think there's truth to it, that if God is all-knowing and all-powerful and suffering still happens, how does that square? And what he said was, and William Lane Craig does some work with this too, God, before he created, in his infinite knowledge, which you have to like take a deep breath and understand what infinite knowledge means, he not only knew what everyone, okay, you got to kind of go out and, okay. So he knew, he knows all of the past and all of the future. But he also knows what's called middle knowledge, which is what would happen. So it's all the possible worlds. And so it's, if Gianna chooses this, then this will happen. It's the if-thens, all the what would happen if all these strings, billions and billions of strings of people's lives played out in billions and billions of different ways. And God chose the best possible world based on everything he knew that could happen. That's basically Molinism. Someone's going to write me an email and tell me I have it completely wrong. But that's my understanding of Molinism and middle knowledge. That middle knowledge is he knows everything that did happen, he knows everything that could happen, and he knows everything that would happen if people made different choices. Because the other part of this is, how does free will fit into it? Hi, I'm Holly, and I'm the primary teacher and author here at Study with Friends. My education is from a Reformed theological seminary, so you'll see that come through as we teach and study together. But on occasion, I'll introduce concepts from other doctrines when I think they shed light on the material, just so that we can have a well-rounded understanding of lots of different perspectives on the text. We strongly believe that you should know and understand who's teaching you the Bible. And so you can learn more about me at studywithfriends.org or zondervan.com. We're just really glad you're here.